can spend, you can save. What is the right thing to do? Federal benefits, thrift savings plans too. You can save your own way with help from our expert team. You can save your own way. Save your own way.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Jamie Shalansky, and I have a guest speaker with us today, Floyd Shalansky, here at Plan Your Federal Retirement, and we're going to be talking about one of our favorite subjects. And you're going to get two varying senses of perspective because there's a little bit of an age gap between Floyd and I. Floyd is my father, and he's also Micah Shalansky's father as well. And him and my mom started our financial planning practice up in Anchorage, Alaska back in 1981. And we have been at this, I would say, a minute or two. So if you stay with Floyd and I today, we are going to tell you about the hundreds of people that we have helped get to and through retirement. And we're going to talk to you about the key areas in which we see people have to go back to work time and time again because they absolutely miss this important aspect of retirement and makes them pull themselves back out of retirement and enter the workforce when they get these particular points wrong. Wouldn't you say, Floyd?
Without a doubt, Jamie. You know, we just, up in Anchorage, we just did a live presentation, and it was amazing listening to people talk and talking to them about getting ready to retire. In our firm, as you know, Jamie, we have some very specific things in a retirement timeline, how to prepare, what to do, and how to get ready for it. And all that's monetary. What happens is many times on the monetary side, people think they've got that wired, but they don't start thinking about the emotional and what am I going to do next. And I think that's a huge thing as we prepare for retirement, especially in the last 5 years or so of your tour of duty with the feds, is that emotional side as well as the financial side. The other piece of it is how many people listening to this are in the first 5 or 10 years of employment with the federal government and never thought they'd be there that long. So we don't start thinking about, our experience has been, we don't start thinking about retirement until we get past that 10, 11, 12-year mark, because I'm not sure I'm going to be here. Well, I'm not sure I'm going to stay. I'm not going to fully fund my TSP because I'll probably go to the private sector. These are the type things that I hear all the time, Jamie.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said that because I often think of our military personnel, right? So especially being in Alaska, we have a huge military presence here in the state. And it's funny when we're talking to military folks about reenlistment because year 8 is a critical point in somebody's military career because normally they signed up for a 4-year tour, they've extended, they did another 4-year tour. So they've got 8 years of under service. But all of a sudden now at the end of that 8, they have to decide, are they going to go 12? Because automatically the psychological aspect of that is if I do 12, well, shoot, I might as well do 20. And for a lot of our civilian federal employees, I find that they have the same sort of mentality is they get a federal job, they're really pumped, they're in it 5 years or so, and they get to about year 8, year 10, and they go, shoot, if I'm already in it this long, I'm finding meaning in the work, I've got great phenomenal benefit package as a federal employee, then why don't I stick and just do the next 20 years here in my position? And as they get ready for that, to do 20 years with the federal government, there's a lot of preparation that goes in beforehand. One of the travesties I find is that most human resources and at the OPM office encourage federal employees to sign up for pre-retirement classes 5 years before they're ready to retire. Well, 5 years is not a lot of time to make financial decisions to get you ready for retirement. We love people to start as soon as they begin their career, definitely mid-career, because it's time in the markets, not timing the markets. And so as we sort of get these nest eggs built up, having all of those years in advance is so advantageous to making a plan. as Floyd mentioned, we have a roadmap to retirement, all the things that you should be doing and getting organized and getting ready before you actually submit your standard form 3107 to apply for an immediate retirement. And part of that conversation that we've had with a lot of people is we'll say, okay, great. You've got these three benefits. You got your TSP, you got your Social Security, and then you also have your pension. Now, OPM often calls your pension annuity. We call it a pension because it's a pension, and we don't want you to get confused with insurance products, which are also annuity. And so as we start looking at that, we start going over cash flow. How much money do you need in retirement? We do all of these financial calculations to get you ready and your spouse and your family for what that transition is. But somewhere about, what do you think, Floyd, 18 months prior to you actually retiring, we have a different type of conversation. We have a conversation that talks about the anxiety of getting ready to retire.
Jamie, I didn't just come into that just a second, but for those of you out there in podcast world or listening, GSA actually has a requirement that every agency is supposed to provide financial education every year. And what we find is that doesn't always happen, number one. And number two, I think they should make it mandated when they first come in and they become an employee. They should attend a class on about the benefits and how the benefits work to start thinking about that retirement. And every 5 years, they are to have that review. Now, to your point, 18 months out, if you're planning retirement and your retirement income is going to be 30% less than your take-home pay, how do you make up the difference? And I think that's the huge piece of it. Whenever the advisors in our firm, when we go out and we talk to high schools or the younger generation, we talk about having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in the checkbook. My pre-retirees, I want 1 to 2 years living expenses in the checkbook. So if you're living on $5,000 a month, you don't want less when you retire. So 5 times 12 is 60. 60 times 24 months, we're talking a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. So from our advising point, but especially when I meet with pre-retirees, 3, hopefully 5 years out from retirement, we calculate what their FERS is going to be. We calculate whether they're going to get the FERS supplement or Social Security. We calculate TSP plus their IRAs and any other investments. And then we start looking at cash flow. And here's what I know in doing this for the number of years I've been doing it, is that the first 12 to 18 months, typically retirees, not all the time, but typically retirees spend 100 to 130% of their income. And I get people say, Floyd, there's no way. And I look at them, I go, you've got honeydew projects to do. You may be relocating. There's travel you're going to do. There's all these things that you may have postponed until, quote, you retire. So you have what? More time to go do it. So in our retirement projections, I know, Jamie knows, that over the first 12 months, we already calculate that additional 20% or so that we're going to overspend. But somewhere around the 12th, 13th month, it better start trending back down to that number that we projected. So why 24 months? Jamie, when's the last time you heard someone retire from the feds and OPM had their retirement check the first of the next month after they retire?
Oh, it never happens. It never happens. So, and to OPM's credit, they have done a phenomenal job of course correcting. They had a really bad crux of, because you had all those boomers, right? So all the baby boomers were retiring, and they had a mass, number of files to have to get through. So there were a few years there that OPM was taking 6 to 9 months to process retirement checks, and they've really caught up. They've really done a good job. And I also think retirees have done a better job of getting more informed, so they're not in those positions. They're not sending incomplete files to OPM and causing, onerous delays. But right now, I think like if you submit, so, we've got a special timing that we like, retirees to use when they're planning out their retirement on the monthly calendar. And then when they go to retire, we're telling them, let's prepare for 6 months of not getting your first pension check from OPM. Now, in that 0 to 6 month period, OPM will make up all of the time that they missed. And in between that, they're going to send you an interim check. And an interim check is going to be what they think it should be for, what your pension should be, while they are auditing, while they are going through, while they are validating all of your credible service. And so as they do that, that interim check might be a little bit different than you and your financial advisor have been calculating, which is why it's so critical to have cash on hand to bridge that gap as OPM. Now, best case scenario, 3 months, and they're going to get it all certified. They're going to get it back to you. That is best case. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Your electronic personnel file is tip top condition. You've already reviewed it. You've already audited it yourself. You have everything outlined, picture perfect for your 20 plus years of service with the government. And remember, if you're looking to retire in the next 5 years, there's a real strong chance that your electronic personnel file was not always electronic. It was paper and had to get scanned. So making sure you're doing all of this work ahead of time is imperative for retirees. So let's move into, Floyd, talking about, you mentioned this, and I think this is so true, is I don't care. And I shared with you that we are on a mission here. Like, we have helped hundreds of people get to and through retirement. We have talked to thousands of federal employees all across the United States, and we are the go-to source for credible content when it comes to your benefits and planning for retirement. And we are on a mission to help 1 million federal employees learn about their benefits to be able to retire informed. And in that process, everyone comes into our office. We tell them how retirement normally works. Floyd alluded to that bell curve, which means when you retire, your expenses are going to ramp up. They're going to ramp up inconsiderably. And then somewhere around that 18 months, it needs to start stabilizing. That first year of retirement, that first 18 months, you are going to overspend your income. What happens when you finally pull the plug and you don't have to get up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. You don't have to get camera ready for Zoom. You don't have to brush off the snow from the car and go into the office anymore. Instead, you get up leisurely. You read the paper, you have your coffee, and you get to do what, Floyd?
Plan your day.
Yeah, you get to plan your day to do whatever it is you wanted to do. And what normally happens when you're planning a day, you're going to go spend some money. Think about how many times, look at the Home Depot and Lowe's parking lot. When is it the most full? It's the most full on Saturday and Sunday. But what happens when every day of the week becomes your Saturday and Sunday? Are your spending going to automatically stop? Are you going to retract and you're going to be like, hey, I'm retired now, so I'm not going to spend any money?
No, actually, you spend more. But Jamie, that's great for the people that are preparing and are listening and kind of prepared to get, to go to work. But I've worked with a lot of senior military officers, a lot of senior GSA or civil servants, and I find they didn't participate in the TSP. They only put enough in maybe to get the match. And as you drill down into it, well, we're raising a family, we did this, we did that. And now all of a sudden, they're at career end time. They're tired of getting up and going to their job. And then the fear sets in, I'm leaving this job and I've got to go find another job because it doesn't cost me less in retirement. 40 years ago, you go to the grocery store. If you walked out with 4 bags of groceries, you spent maybe $100. And now you walk out with 4 bags of groceries and it's $300. Regrettably, this cost of living has continued to go up with inflation, and we can blame it on lots of things. And what I try to tell individuals is don't compare yourself to somebody else. Don't look at how do I compare with, my counterpart that I work besides at work that we talk about all the time, about this, that, and the other. Don't compare yourself to the person that retired 3 weeks ago or 3 years ago. We have to look at your situation. How much do you have in savings? What do you spend per month? How are you taking care of your children? Are you taking care of elderly parents or elderly relatives? All these little things factor in. And when you're working with an advisor and you're preparing yourself for retirement and you're doing that retirement timeline, ladies and gentlemen, you have to be extremely honest with that advisor. I got a senior parent that I'm worried about. I got a senior aunt that I just simply love and I worry about them. And I know they're not taking care of themselves. How do I help them? Because all of a sudden you may be retired and not worrying about it. And then you find yourself as a sandwich generation. You've got kids behind us and parents ahead of us, and you're helping both, and you're in the middle, and you're tired of your job. You want to make a job change. all these things factor in to emotionally preparing to retire. And I think that's critical. And so many times we meet people through the seminars, through the interviews that we do, that when we start talking about these other issues, their comment is, I thought it was just about money. And it's not just about money. It's about your life and what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And yes, you need money, but we have to understand what liabilities, what are the risks out there, not market risk, but risk of how we're going to spend more money.
Let's dive into the psychological phases of retirement. And, first, Floyd and I are financial advisors. So we have no background education experience in psychology. So when we talk to you about this, we're going to be talking to you from our perspective of meeting with hundreds of people as they prepare to go to and through retirement phases. And that, number one, is that pre-retirement anxiety. It is that getting ready and having concerns about transitioning.
Oh, without a doubt. It's the unknown, right? I love it. And I tell the story of a client that, we retained our services years and years and years ago. And they came in and the wife hired me because the husband was retired Air Force. And he was also working up at Prudhoe Bay. We call it the slope in Alaska. And during that period of time, he would go to work for 2 weeks and come back, and she would stay here with the family and the grandkids and all. And she says, Floyd, we really want to get him off the slope and retire. So he walks in the office. And the first time I meet him, he asks me, and I start telling him about what we do and how we do it and how we prepare. And he looks at me dead in the face and says, can I retire? And I says, not at this time. He got up and walked out, literally got up, left the conference room and walked out. And his wife said,
his wife in the conference room.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 3 years later, and as we're going through this, we're meeting with them very regularly, managing cash flow, paying off debt, balancing things out. Every meeting, he would show up, ask one question and leave. And then about 3 years into it, he asked that question. And I said, yeah, we can retire. He got up, walked up to the door and looked at me and says, what'd you say? I said, you can retire. The money seems to be where it needs to be at. I feel very comfortable. You can sustain your lifestyle. Well, he still went back to work. But when he did retire, now this is the crazy part. When he did retire, after about 3 weeks, I'm in a meeting. His wife calls and says, I got to talk to Floyd. It's about my husband. I got to talk to Floyd. And I'm going, the staff interrupted me and they said, my mind goes, oh God, he's dead.
Yeah. How many times does that happen, right? That people work their entire lives, they retire and they're dead within 30 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just blows your mind. Yeah. But that wasn't what Sue said about Bob, huh?
No, not at all. What she said was, Floyd, do you have a job for him? I go, what? No, I said, don't get me wrong. I love my husband, but he's rearranged the kitchen. He's done this. He's done this. And if you don't get him out of here, I'm going to take a black skillet and hit him upside the head. Jokingly, of course, right? But one of the things that we talk a lot about, if you're married, if you have a spouse, is your spouse ready for you to retire?
Mm-hmm.
We hear that so many times. Well, I'm going to retire early and she or him are going to continue to work. You're going, what? Oh, yeah, I'm going to stay home. I'm going to do all the meals and this, that, and the other. And how long does that last? The couple lays in bed while the other one gets up at 4 a.m., put their clothes on and does the shuffle. It doesn't last long. And all of a sudden, now they want both to retire. So it's that balancing act, that communication, open communication between spouses as well as advisors. Extremely important, Jamie.
Do you know the difference between a postponed or deferred retirement and the massive impacts this can have on your federal benefits and your future? In fact, one of the best benefits you have as a federal employee might be in jeopardy because of this. Many federal employees are unsure what path to take, unsure what things to do. That's why we created a free course to help guide you through this process and avoid kind of the top 7 mistakes that we see from federal employees. So you're going to avoid these 7 mistakes. You're going to learn these 7 lessons in our online course designed to help you. Now, why do we do this for free? Because I hate it when a federal employee has to contact me and I'm reviewing what they did. I was like, we could have avoided this mistake had we had been involved earlier. Had you had known this information, you could have made a much better decision with your retirement. That's why we're giving it away. We want to help transform your life as a federal employee and give you that right information. So to sign up for this, all you need to do is jump on our website, planyourfederalretirement.com/applying for retirement. Again, that's planyourfederalretirement.com/applying for retirement. Long name, but hopefully it'll be amazing results for you, getting you that information that you need to help transform your life in retirement. Till next time, happy planning.
Yeah. And so, it's interesting because we go through these different phases as we gear up for retirement. So, the first, when we start thinking about retirement, we start getting anxious that we don't have enough money, right? Because most retirees that we talk to, pre-retirees, their number one fear is outliving their retirement savings. That's the number one fear. So if we had one scope or objective, it is to help people not do that. We don't want you to outlive your retirement savings. That's what we are on a mission to do. But as they build up and they get closer to that actual retirement date, there's all this anxiety that Floyd was alluding to when he was talking about Bob coming into the office and saying, hey, can I retire? Can I retire? Can I retire? And it was no, because they weren't financially prepared. They hadn't done the grunt work to get ready for retirement. But the day Bob heard yes, he was able to retire, he didn't believe him. He didn't just go over and spill out his SF 3107 and turn it in. He didn't believe him. He said, no, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way. And so all of a sudden, I find that the federal employees that we work with, they get really, really excited about retirement. But then as it becomes reality, as we're actually setting a date, as we're actually talking about when they're going to submit their paperwork, all of a sudden in fact, we just had another client do this last year to us, Floyd. We were working with them. So we call all of our clients are Bob and Sue. So Sue was ready to retire. She met all her qualifications. She had great assignments. Yeah. Loved the work she was doing. It was real. It was fun. Just wasn't really fun anymore. And she was ready to move on to do different stuff. We filled out the retirement application. She filled it out, brought it to us. We always like to put a second set of eyes on it just to make sure. Never hurts to have somebody else also review it. In particular, we want to make sure that, especially if you're married, you're not disinheriting your spouse on that retirement paperwork. It's easy to do. So we want to make sure that somebody's there to catch it. And so she filled it out. We thought she retired. We were going in to have a meeting with her, popping champagne corks and thinking, great, she's retired now. And she said, oh, no. Actually, I took a different assignment. I'm good. I pulled that paperwork back. And so she got nervous about wanting to retire. Nervous. Well, why? Why was she nervous about wanting to be done? Because we often think so much about gosh, it'd be great to retire. I can't wait till I'm done with my job. I can't wait till this is done. And now we go into this phase where when it becomes a reality, we are so anxious and nervous. And it's a very tumultuous event about whether or not it's the right time to do it. The first phase that we go through after we have that pre-retirement anxiety is this honeymoon phase. So we retire from federal service and we're getting used to it. Those first 90 days are really weird. Believe it or not, they will be for you too, because for 20 plus years, your circadian clock is set to wake up at a certain time, and you're set to have certain objectives, and you're set to have certain goals for the day that you need to get done. And all of a sudden, you've got this expansive amount of time before you where you don't have to race off to something else. And then after we kind of get through that transitional period, then we go into the honeymoon phase. And that honeymoon phase is, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe I still get to spend money and I don't have to go to work. But as Floyd was telling you with that honeymoon phase, that's that bell curve, right? And that honeymoon phase, this is where we see people, as Floyd said, I believe 130%. Is that what you said, Floyd?
Yeah.
They spend over about 130% of their income because now it's your time. Now it's your time that you get to go on the extended trips. No longer is it 2 days and did I get enough leave and I have to race back. Now it's, yeah, I could spend 30 days in Europe. Cool. I've always wanted to see what Sardinia was like. Let me pop over there and rent a boat. Then it's, a lot of clients did the El Camino, where they did not El Camino. Why do I always call it a car? What is it called?
Camino.
Yes.
It's the Camino. The Camino.
The Camino Santiago. Is that what it is? De Santiago? Yeah. So the big walk over in Europe that people do. Or, they're building sheds. They're doing woodworking. They're doing gardening. They're helping out with their grandkids more than they ever thought they were going to necessarily. And so in this honeymoon stage, it is spend, because you're giving yourself this permission to do so. I earned this. I waited my whole life for this. And
Jamie, we had that one client retired and he took up flying lessons. And that took up so much. I mean, just to get his private pilot's license, we got him on a separate credit card. And every time we'd come in and review their spending, that credit card kept getting bigger and
Uh-huh.
bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we had a client retire and want to go race car driving. Remember that?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then, he spent 5 years on, I'm going to call it the Formula V class, but very basic low end on the Grand Touring classes. And he did that for about 5, 7 years. Then we decided he needed to go back to work for a little bit because he didn't slow down in 18 months. He continued to spend. But it was after, 30 years of being an executive, he was done. He wanted something that he wanted to do that he had postponed.
So that is where I feel, Floyd, that most of the clients struggle the greatest is, and we saw this with clients that are executives. So if you have been a manager, a supervisor, if you're executive, if you're a commander in the military, this is where it normally really, or a pilot, right? We see this a lot with our pilots. And that is when you go to retire and you no longer are what you do, then who are you?
Right.
And is that identity crisis, especially if you are used to leading a mission, and whether that's a mission with the VA, if it's with the Park Service, if you've got something that you are trying to accomplish and do, and you go to retire, now what? Who are you when you are no longer what you do?
Yes. And it's kind of like, and it's that framing the mental mindset, right? So we work with teachers. And when a teacher retires, they typically retire in May. And typically teachers have the summer off. They maybe do some continuing education, but they don't get up and go in the classroom. At least not in the state of Alaska, because we don't have year-round education like that. But they don't feel they're retired until September, when all their friends are going back in the classroom preparing things and they don't have to do it. So
Yeah.
everything becomes, it's that mental side. So much energy is put into education about money and cash flow and budgets. And I hate budgets, so we call them spending plans. But all energy goes into that. Sometimes there's not enough energy put into thinking about the mental side of this and how it's going to change a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. That's so funny because as you're saying that, I'm remembering like a lot of our clients say, hey, come in October, and they said, January 1st, we're going to retire. Well, we live in the Pacific Northwest. Why do you want to retire in January? It's
Right.
dark, it's cold, and unless you're immediately going to get on a plane and you're Maui bound, why are you retiring when it's dark and cold? Get up, go to work, do those things, and go retire in the spring when you actually don't want to go to work anymore, when there's other things you do want to go do that aren't related to work.
Or if you're burning a bunch of leave time, work until March and then burn the leave time while you can go play and enjoy it. There's all kind of things that fit into that. And I think that's the biggest thing in this podcast that I would like to see come out in our conversation, Jamie, is not only the financial side, being prepared with, 1 to 2 years worth of your living expenses already set aside, but emotionally. And in the seminar that we did this last week, I encourage people to some of you may remember the old day timers before they went digital. So if you don't have a day timer, get a piece of paper out, get a calendar out and say, look, when I retire, this is what I'm going to do. This is what my day will look like. Think of it, plan it out, write it out. So when you do retire, you have an idea of what you want to do. So many times it's like, well, let me ask the question, Jamie. How many times do we hear our retirees say that Bob that retired last year, he still comes around the shop 2 or 3 times a week to drink coffee? Why? Because their social life was all around the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
By planning it, plotting it can help with that separation sometimes.
So I have to share with you my mother-in-law, because we were chatting with her, and my spouse was really concerned that she was starting to show the signs of dementia. And she said, every time I talk to her, I'm hearing the same stories over and over again, and she's forgetting that she already told me that. And so we sat down and I said, okay, let's look at these areas that dementia, you can really tell if somebody's starting to slip. And then I said, do you think she's really has a cognitive disability, or do you think that after working her entire life and then retiring and no longer having coworkers and work friends, that her social circle has diminished? And that she's telling you the same story because she doesn't have many people to tell the same stories to anymore. And that social aspect we forget about so often. It will be interesting to see if post COVID, with so many people now working remotely, if they still feel that same way. But you got to think that your social circle, maybe your friends are retiring the same time as you, maybe they're not. But who are you going to now go be friends with? And maybe the people that are retiring the same time, they don't have the same financial situation. And so maybe you're planning a trip to, Africa, but that is way outside of their scope of what they could do. They're planning a trip to Vegas. And so who are you going to fill your daily life with? Who are the new friends and the new communities that you are going to start developing? And it's so funny to say this, Floyd, because when you sit there with a 40, 50-year-old, they're in the thralls of working, they're in the thralls of raising their kids, they're getting them off to college, and they're like, you know what? I don't need more friends. I have enough friends. But we have witnessed that some of your best friends that you will have for the rest of your life, you don't even meet until age 60.
That's a true statement, Jamie. In Alaska, we have a lot, I'm going to call them transplants. So a lot of the people that come up here, they come up on a short-term tour, and then they opt to stay. And when they opt to stay, their dreams may be, I'm going to go back to my hometown. I'm going to go back to the last place that before I moved to Alaska. And in our conversations, we asked, why would you do that? And they said, well, it's simple. That's where all my friends are at. So if you stop and think about it, though, your friends may have not moved on as you had. My hometown in North Texas, the people I know there, they've never left. They don't go on vacations. They don't go on holidays. And, we sit and we talk with them, and they talk about, my vacation is 2 weeks up to the lake. We got a trailer, and we just go fishing every day. And in my mind, I'm going, whoa, that's all they have? But that's all they have. I have cousins that's never been on a jet airplane because they're wrapped into this one little world that they stay in today. And I think that's important for our pre-retirees to kind of think about. You can always go home, but maybe you can't go back home. Unless, of course, you're going back to take care of parents, and then that's a whole nother.
Well, so let's chat about that real quick, right? So not parents, but I've seen in the last 3 years, a lot of federal employees leave where they're at because they want to be closer to their adult children.
Oh, yes, for sure.
And their grandkids. I tell my son all the time, he's age 23. So I said, hey, I can wait to be a grandma, but I will be a grandma. Like, I cannot wait. I see what my parents get away with, and it's close to murder. I can't wait for that role.
Be nice, Jamie. Be nice. Yeah.
But we see a lot of federal employees that when they get done, they're waiting for their adult children who are normally in their 20s, maybe early 30s, to figure out where they're going to settle. And then they're selling everything and they're moving near their adult children. Now, here is fast forward to moving near your adult children, get about a year and a half down the road, and all of a sudden we're having conversation with those federal employee retirees that go something like this. I thought I would see my kids more.
Yeah.
I thought I would see the grandkids more. They're busy. They have their own lives going. They have, all the school. The kids are active in all the sports. I thought it would look a little bit different. And so then all of a sudden they move down to this place to be closer to everyone, but you don't necessarily want to do all the babysitting. You don't necessarily want to do all the shuffling to all the different school activities. And so you're in this weird position of, do I get to be the grandma or am I the bus driver and the babysitter? And this is where we see most of our retirees start branching off and developing new hobbies, new interests, because now they've moved away from home. They've moved away from their social circle to go be close to their kids and their grandkids, but they're finding that most days they're not spending the time they thought they were going to with them. Now they have to go develop other forms of community around them.
And it's that community, Jamie, that is so important. In fact, we were talking to pre-retirees this last week, and one of my mode of operations, if you will, if you're going to leave the state of Alaska and you're going to travel or you're going to retire someplace else, 2 to 3 years out, I encourage people when they take their vacations, go rent a car and start driving. Go look for that place that it feels really good. And when you find that place that feels really good, and you're retired and you move into that area, I encourage them not to buy a house, rent for the first year. You may find that where you thought you wanted to live, you don't fit in. What does that mean? Well, think about it. If you go back home, if you go somewhere and you're active in your church, a lot of time church has little cliques. If you're active
All
in
the
the
time
Elks
churches
Club
have clicks.
or the Moose organization, you show up and everybody embraces you for the first day or two because they think you're traveling through. But all of a sudden, as you try to fit in, you're talking with people that have been friends for 20 years. And,
Yes.
and you're on the outside of that. How do I make that connection? And those things play out a lot. And that's the thing that a lot of times we forget. I tell my retirees, when you leave and you retire, you're not buying your last final home. You got 3 more moves left. Oh, no, Floyd, this is it. All right. And they'll go build, I'm going to call it a McMansion, but they're going to build their dream home. And if they like to play golf, it's going to be in the sunshine, a lot of golf courses. If they like to ski, it's going to be in the mountain areas. If they like the ocean, it's going to be, on one of the coasts typically. I said, well, that's fantastic. But all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 years later, that 4,000 foot home, when the kids don't come up and the grandkids aren't around, gets rather large. So you downsize, right? And then when you downsize, the kids are, they got to get on an airplane. In Alaska, the travel start in Seattle. So I don't want to have to fly to Seattle and then fly across country. So I want to be close. How close? Oh, a day or two drive. That's fine. So now you're a day or two drive. And as you get older, as we get older, what happens is we become a little more worrisome about how do we take care of ourselves. And I will tell you, every parent I know, myself included, and everyone that I talk to in a seminar and say, what do you tell your kids? When I retire, I do not want to be a what, Jamie?
A burden. I do not
On
want to be
my
a burden
children.
on my children.
Right. So you move closer. That's your second move. Your third move is you typically move into the town or the city where the kids are at so they can help you out as you age. And the next move is either into an old folks home or to the basement of your kid's house. A reversal. No, it'll never happen to me. Let me just say to the audience, in my 40 years of doing this, helping feds and non-feds retire, I've helped thousands of people retire. That's the 80% probability of what's going to happen.
Now, Floyd keeps mentioning Alaska because that's where our home office for Plan Your Federal Retirement is located out of. But we work with federal employees all across the United States. So when we mention something in Alaska, don't think it isn't going to happen to you. This is, even if you are living in Maine, this is still going to happen to you. We see people move from Tennessee to Kentucky. We see them move from Massachusetts to Oregon. Idaho was really, really hot for the last 3 years for people to move to. Gets all 4 seasons, easy commute on the roads, and not overly populated. This happens all of the time because we're humans and we go through all of these different key areas, psychological phases of retirement. And this reorientation phase, which is what we're talking about, which is finding new hobbies, it's finding new routines, it's finding new friends and developing new communities, is all about continued sense of purpose and making sure, remember we said to and through retirement. So as we get closer and closer to that stability phase, that's the imperative part, is remembering that just because we're retired doesn't mean we're done transitioning with our lives. So as we move into stability, what does that look like for most of your retirees, Floyd?
Jamie, you brought up an excellent point on that. Well, number one is that, some of our clients are here in the States, but right now we're working with people in all 50 different states. And either we've got 3 or 4 clients, either DOD or working, in the European markets. I don't think we have anybody in the Asian markets right now. But people hear the podcast or they see the YouTube channel. And we've had lots of interesting conversations with people globally, if you will. So, in this transition, getting ready, trying to find these new organizations, I encourage a lot of people, if the monetary side of it is good, is to volunteer, find something besides Home Depot or Lowe's that they can, get involved in and try to make a difference. For our executives or our upper level in the FERS system, there's programs that in local towns that you can go in and be a part-time CEO to mentor younger people and drawing, and making things happen. Just recently on the East Coast, one of my retired military officers and also a retired high-end civil service, I introduced him to a friend in South Carolina that's helping him align himself with some of these younger startup companies to get to kind of mentor those type things. And that's the biggest piece of it, Jamie, is finding that purpose again, not only the friendships, but how do I make a difference in the world if I'm not supervising 10 or 15 people?
Mm-hmm. A new sense of living and satisfaction through that living. And you got to think with a lot of retirees, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that is just leaving the workforce that this new generation is thirsty for. Is really, and we can make all of the derogatory comments that we want to about the generations. We did it to the baby boomers and to the millennials. The millennials are doing it to Gen Z. Gen Z will do it to Gen Alpha. It will continue to perpetuate that. We think that the up and comers aren't as smart, aren't as caring, aren't as hardworking as we are. But whose responsibility is that to change the narrative? It's ours. So if we have something to give to the younger generation, go find the ones that want to listen, that are eager to hear it, and let's be a part of that difference. Let's create a retirement in which we are feeling very satisfied and we're feeling good about our contribution and our sense of purpose. I mean, we can do all the best financial planning in the world, and we can financially calculate. Our joke in the office when people say, do I have enough money to retire? Well, tell me the day you're going to die and I'll get this thing down to the penny. But other than that, we can make a sustainable long-term plan, but there's so many different variables that will come into impact. And so as we prepare people for retirement financially, that sense of purpose, you got to come up with it. You have to focus on that, and you have to be just as dedicated to finding that in retirement as you were to your career and to saving for retirement, because that's what gets you through retirement.
Jamie, I say this all the time to my clients, is that I like to see 5-year plans, right? If you're 5 years out from retirement, here's our plan. All right, write down that day I'm going to retire. That gives you a waypoint to navigate towards. And then, 1 year into it, I say, pop up the periscope, look around. Everything looks good. We continue to sell. All right. So now not only do we have a 4-year plan until I retire, what's my year after I retirement going to look at? And then you're 3 years out, up periscope and look around. What has changed? All right. Well, maybe this job came open in another city that you've always dreamed about doing. Hey, Floyd, I'm going to throw my name in. I'm not going to get it, but I'm going to throw my name in. All right. Then you go down the road 6 months later, you get the phone call. We wanted you to come from an interview. Whoa, up periscope again. What would it look like if I extended my retirement by 2 years to go do this job or this project I really wanted to do? Let's plan for it. Let's plot on it. But sometimes it's just like you draw a card and this is what you go do. We're planners. The more that we plan, we can always adjust. Nothing's written in black and white except your COD date, right?
Yes.
When we say COD date, people say cost of delivery. No, that's your crap out date. That's in the very bottom right-hand side of your birthday or your birth certificate. That's just a joke. But sometimes we minimize.
Terrible joke.
Sometimes we minimize exactly plotting those things out. But it's so important. The more we have a plan, the more you have an idea, you can adjust. Some people like to adjust on the fly, and that's okay. But I really like the plan, what we're going to do, where we're going to go, modify along the way if you need to. And in my years of doing this, every time we've had those plans out there, we've always modified them. But our retirees, I think I've only had 2 in my career that do go back to work. Why do they have to go back to work? They started day trading. That was back in the 90s. But we plot and plan. So when we say you can drop the retirement papers and do it, we feel confident of 85% probability this will be successful, even at the craziness in the international world and the markets today.
So true. So true. All right. So this podcast is all about giving federal employees action items that they can take and implement right now. Floyd and I walked you through our perspective as financial advisors about the psychological journey that people go on in retirement. And when they get this wrong, when they fail to take this into consideration, then their retirement plan fails because it isn't what they wanted it to look like. And it doesn't feel like you thought it would feel like. And it don't sit here and pull the wool over your eyes thinking, oh, it won't happen to me. That's not me. That's not us. What if your retirement plan is different than that of your spouse's? Then what? How are you guys going to find that balance and that new sense of purpose as you move forward? And we find this a lot, when your kids leave and you get that empty nester kind of, they call it empty nester syndrome. And I think a lot of people have done a really good job of navigating what that looks like. But think about that change of identity when it was two ships passing in the night because somebody's doing schoolwork, somebody's getting the kids to hockey practice, somebody's got full-time job, we've got snack day. You've got all these things where your identity and your purpose was your job and raising your kids. Now you remove both of those elements off the table. Now what is your sense of purpose? And when you fail to put time into planning that, your retirement plan fails you. Because all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how much money you have saved away for retirement. You don't know what to do and you don't feel good about who you are any longer. So the areas that we talked about, the 5 different areas, the psychological phases we find most federal employees go through as they plan for retirement. Number 1, that pre-retirement anxiety, the concerns about actually transitioning. What does the 18 months before you retire actually look like, and how are you planning for that? Number 2, the honeymoon phase, the excitement about all the freedom and the opportunity and the chance that I can go do all of these different things that I never had time before to do. Number 3, the disillusionment phase, especially if you're on the upper echelon of working for whatever agency that you're employed with, is, do I have a sense of purpose any longer? When I'm not doing what I did for a living, then who am I? And that feeling of loss, it's real. And then the reorientation phase, finding new routines, finding new hobbies, finding new friend groups. And then we move into that stability phase where a new sense of living and satisfaction has to come from. You have to find that for your retirement plan to be successful. So those are the common challenges that we see. We identify really specific ones like the loss of identity and purpose, the social isolation, even if you move near your adult children, and then having a really hard time adapting to changes into daily routine. When we get quote unquote stuck in our ways, how are we going to safeguard ourselves from not having that happen? So Floyd, as they look towards preparing themselves psychologically for retirement, not just financially, as an advisor, what would you recommend for them?
Again, plan out your day. Take that day timer. What am I going to do? What trips are you going to take? When are you going to take these trips? If you're both, you and your spouse, retiring at the same time, it's a little easier. If your spouse is working and one retires a year beforehand because of eligibility or something like that, how does that transition look like? Start trying to work it today. The more that you can act as if you are retired before you retired, you start seeing some of the chinks in the armor, if you will. So number 1, I would say I don't like digital personally. That's just my age group. So pen and paper and write it down. If you're digital, type it in, get it structured. This is what I'm going to look like in the first month, the third month, the fifth month. My end goal after the first year is to do X, Y, Z. All those things, at least ways, get the mind to think. And I'm one of those guys that believe if we can think it and speak it and share it, it'll come to pass. It's when we keep it only in our brain and we don't see it black and white and we don't share it with our spouses, is that it changes. Okay, the brain says, well, he's not really interested, so we're not going to worry about it. But when you write it down and then you share it with somebody and you speak it out loud, the brain goes, oh my goodness gracious, he really wants to do this. And if he really wants to do this, we better get our proverbial act together. So the day timer, write it out, plan it out the first year, first 18 months, Jamie.
All right. I also think it's setting realistic expectations. Don't live in fantasy land of what you think this is going to be like. Plan it out on a day to day. Like Floyd is mentioning, what does it look like? What time are you getting up? What are you doing with the first half of your morning? What does the afternoon look like? What does the evening look like? How are you actually going to get through when nothing else, no exterior force is driving your hour by hour? And set realistic expectations that if you dreamed of, going and traveling the world with your friends, are you in the same retirement position that they are in? And if you're not, are you open to being able to meet new friends and go on new experiences with those individuals? And then I would say, lastly, how are you going to stay connected? How are you going to stay? One of the best pieces of advice, Dad, I can't remember who this was, but somebody had told you guys like they were probably in their early 60s when we met them. And I was a kid at the time, so I was probably a teenager. But we said, you have so much vitality, you have so much energy. You're always thinking of the future and what's happening in the world ahead. How do you stay so young minded? And they said the best piece of advice that they could give someone is that always have friends a little bit older, friends in your age group, and make friends with people that are 20 years younger than you are.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And
Exactly
it helps keep you engaged to the things, helps keep you aware of what the social, concerns and the economic concerns are for the up and coming generation. And they remind you of your vitality. They keep you invited to all of those things. And I always thought that was really, I dismissed it as a kid, but as I age, I see its importance of staying connected and staying open to making friends in all different areas of your life.
Without a doubt. There's that joking around when your grandma can't figure out how to make one of her iPhones work. She calls the grandkids, and the grandkids roll their eyes and say, "Grandma, just turn it off and turn it on." That a hard reboot, if you will. All these technology is so fast and so upcoming that people my age have a tendency. I think I'm pretty intelligent with it, but I see some of the stuff that the younger generation, Jamie and my grandkids, are doing, and I'm lost. Hard to keep up. But having them in my lives compels me to want to learn more. Having them in my lives compels me to want to try to keep up. Now, there's those times I'd rather go hang out with people in my own age group and drink a couple glasses of wine instead of hike 35 miles with Jamie and her grandkids up and down the mountains trying to collect the inheritance sooner, I think.
Okay, one time it was 7 miles, and I apologized several times. It was very poor planning on my behalf.
But your mom and I tried to keep up. Yeah.
Not tried, you did, but I was real worried we're going to get helicoptered off that mountain.
It was a couple times.
Yeah. All right. Plan your federal retirement community. I hope you found this episode on the psychological impacts of getting ready to retire from a financial planning perspective helpful. We are always here to answer your questions. If you have questions like this or similar or topics that you want to hear about, we want to know. We are on a burning mission to touch 1 million federal employees and make sure they can make informed decisions about their retirement. We cannot do it without you. We grow organically. You won't see us advertise. You won't see us big billboards outside the DFW airport. We rely on you guys to let us know if this information is of value. And if it is of value to you, share it and let's help us make that mission possible. Let's make more informed decisions by people who really care about you having a successful retirement. Until then, happy planning.
Happy planning.